100%. Yeah. She's gaining
Right.
so much weight. Calm, she has the appetite of James.
Yeah.
I can actually mention that on the podcast today.
Yeah, well, we're live right now. Perfect. Facebook, everything. Yeah, so we've got a special guest today on the podcast. Mia DeLacy's there with her bulking strategy. She's added how much? Like 33% body weight in a few weeks. So that's like extreme
That's
bulking
crazy.
right there.
Yeah. She's almost
Pure muscle mass too.
Almost
So
10 pounds.
yeah. So there we go. So that's a good intro for our today's topic. So this is the Lift Big, Eat Big show number 2. We're here live. If you're listening on the podcast, obviously we're not live, but we're going to cover a bunch of different topics today, from bulking strategies, so things that we've all done to gain weight and build muscle, regarding diet. And then we're going to go into some of the, I guess, the controversy within the weightlifting world, plus some of the results of the youth weightlifting world. And then we're going to go into Europe's strongest man as well, and cover some of the news there. But first, maybe we have to, because this is only the second episode, people probably still don't know who we are. But myself, I'm the least accomplished athlete here, but worked mainly in professional sport as a strength and conditioning coach. We have Mona, who's on the podcast, 6-time karate world champion, CrossFit Games athlete, Commonwealth Games medalist in Olympic weightlifting, plus African champion, plus a billion other awards. And then we have Colm as well, 2 times world's strongest man competitor, New Zealand's strongest man, plus a plethora of other achievements there. So let's just go straight into the bulking things. Mona, I know you've done a few things, and I know you have struggled to gain weight and kind of push that body weight up. Are there things that you have found that have worked well for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, firstly, starting off with, I know it's scary for a lot of females when it comes to having to bulk or add weight. But one thing is, when you are in the sporting world and you have to add weight to increase, muscle mass, strength, all of those things, then it's really important. And one of the reasons why we had to bulk, especially because we compete in a weight category sport, and my weight ended up dropping a little bit when we moved to Romania from the USA, and this then basically had me having to gain weight. And also the weight categories changed when it was when they basically added weight to the Olympics, and it went from me competing as a 63 kilogram weightlifter to a 64 kilogram weightlifter. And for some athletes, that's not a lot, just to gain a kilogram. But like I said, because I had to, or when we moved, my weight dropped till around like 62, 61 when we moved to Romania. I had to make sure I, not just with, training, but also having to gain weight. So yeah, the things that I did, we had to up our calories quite a lot. I can't remember exactly how much we ended up eating, but I know it was way over the 2,000 calories. And I think it might have been, James, you might correct me, I think it was like around 2,600 or 2,700 calories or something like that we ended up eating. And I know, again, like I said, for a lot of females weighing in, low 60s, that sounds like a big number. But what we ended up doing was checking my weight daily, making sure that my weight is not dropping, and just making sure that it's going up. So if my weight ended up dropping, we obviously had to add more calories to my diet. And things that we did, not always the healthiest way to gain weight, but I had to add a lot of high calorie things to my diet, like intra carbs, like maltodextrin. That was one of the biggest things. And for example, where I would normally have had like 1 serving, I would end up having like 2 servings a day, just to make up for those calories. Not scared of carbs and fats, making sure I had enough of that. Every now and again I had to, and I know Colm talked about this last week too, is, adding some, I would say, bad foods to the diet. I ended up having some McDonald's as well, which I normally wouldn't have had, but, just to get in those extra calories. So I would get eat things like fries or the McDonald's burgers and things like that, or milkshakes. And that was the stuff that I had to do to gain that extra calories to basically help me not lose strength, working up towards the Olympic qualifiers.
Yeah, and I know it was tough for you to get a lot of that food in. And I know Colm's been on some of that perma bulk life as well. Some of those, what do they call it, dreamer bulks and dirty bulks and whatever else. Do you want to maybe dive into a little bit of that?
Yeah. So basically, like a dreamer bulk was based on this guy off the bodybuilding forums years ago who just gained a ridiculous amount of weight fast, and with that came a lot of fat. So it's definitely not the smartest way to do things. But you'll see there's quite like GoMad. That was a really popular one back in the day. You've heard of that one, eh? The gallon of milk a day.
The funny thing was it was always paired with starting strength, which was like the lowest training program. So I was like, what are you doing?
So you're very likely to gain quite a bit of fat if you suddenly do that. But yeah, in terms of like recommendations for bulking, you're better off starting with a like 10 to 20% increase in what your maintenance is, and then you can go from there. But and like, so a lot of guys in my realm of things, like with strongman, obviously involved with a lot of super heavyweights, guys who are wanting to gain a lot, often ask me, you know, how do you eat so much and that sort of thing. And I would say my number one tip in terms of, well, hang on, to step it back a little bit. Firstly, you have to be realistic with yourself about what your goal actually is. And just saying like you want to get bigger or you want to gain weight, you really need to understand how much of a priority it is to you. Because if, just like any other attribute, the ability to eat comes easier to some and is harder for others. So if it is hard for you, you need to understand if it is a hard thing, you're going to have to work on it and you're going to have to make it a priority. And then at the same time, you have to know for yourself, is health going to be more of a priority, or, you know, do you just really want to gain weight? If you're just wanting to gain weight and that's more of a priority for you at the moment than your health, then you're more likely to use those takeaways and that sort of those kind of options. But so following on from that, I would say, regardless of those options, my number one tip, if you're wanting to be like a super heavyweight or just gain weight from where you're at, and you're struggling with the actual eating side of things, so not necessarily looking at nutrition overall, I would say work overtime on learning how to eat faster. Right, that's my number one tip. Because just
I'm good at that.
Hear all the time, it helps a lot. But you hear all the time with people wanting to lose weight, they'll be recommended to eat slower and like chew their food extra for extra time and whatnot. The opposite applies. So understand as well, it's not going to happen straight away. It's not, like I said, it's still think of it like a physical attribute. If you're struggling to eat a lot, it's not, you can't just suddenly flick a switch like, oh, okay, I just have to eat fast and do it. It might take you like even years of working on eating really fast. If it's a real big priority to be a heavyweight for you, or to just gain a lot of weight, work on that skill of eating fast. We can see it's a skill if you look at like professional eaters or you know, like Furious Pete and that sort of thing. Like they eat ridiculously fast, and it is something that you can work on. But you can get a lot of calories in fast before you kind of realize that you're full. And you do have to understand you're likely going to be uncomfortable. If it's a hard thing for you, it's just the way life works with anything that you're not good at. You have to get better at being uncomfortable with that particular attribute. So that would be my number one tip, like in terms of trying to get better at eating, is learn, like, let's say tuna and rice is your standard meal, right? You can work on eating, like if you want, you can even time it and work over time at improving how fast you can eat that. And then if you add a little bit of like extra bulk to that meal, you're not going to notice it as much if you can eat it faster and faster. But otherwise, like simple tips, olive oil, I'm a big fan of. Like if you add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to, let's say, rice and chicken meal, rice and steak meal, whatever, mix it around, you won't really even notice it. And if you combine that with eating fast, you should still be relatively hungry afterwards. Again, depending on how just how that is for you. Olive oil is so easy like that. Like if you wanted 2.5 tablespoons, that's 500 calories right there. That's most people's surplus taken care of straight away. Really easy to do, provided everything else is taken care of. But otherwise, like Mona was saying, sports drinks and all that sort of thing, also a useful tool. What actually got pretty popular in the strongman world, I've never tried this because I haven't really needed to, but when Thor was at his peak, like getting really big with the vertical diet, they were putting dextrose powder in his rice. So he would have his rice cooker, and then they would add extra dextrose powder or butter, which I think is kind of funny. Like stepping back, essentially you're taking like rice and then you're adding sugar and fat to it. But at the same, from a health perspective, but at the same time, it's extra calories. That is another option. And I think the other thing in terms of like my tips for someone bulking would be to find what works for you. Definitely like eating fast, but otherwise finding what works for you personally and with what kind of foods you're going to create that surplus with. So like for me, olive oil is super easy. I honestly don't even I really like the taste of it and it doesn't fill me up much at all. Conversely, someone else it might fill up a lot, and rice they might be able to eat easy, or juice, they'll just love drinking juice. I did drink quite a lot of juice, but at the same time, I don't really like it, to be honest. I'm one of those boring people who just likes drinking water. But if you're better off, if you find it easy to drink juice and it's easier for you to get your surplus from carbs, I would go with that. Just like with training, if you find a certain style of training just works for you, I would encourage you to gravitate towards that. Same with eating.
Yeah, those are nice. And I've done a lot of those too. The olive oil stuff is epic. Yeah, Mona?
Yeah. Now I wanted to add what Colm was mentioning also with the juice and stuff. One thing that also helped me was because like you were mentioning, eating really fast and becoming good at it. I ended up finding the faster I ate, the more nauseous I would get. So I would actually be able to eat less at the end of the day. So what I ended up doing was I used to drink my calories. So we ended up trying to make a really calorie dense smoothie. And we would even add things like mass gainer and stuff like that. And what we also ended up doing was I would have my dinner and make a milkshake of mass gainer. Because it was so hard for me to gain weight. So for me, like you were saying, how every single person is different, how some people love food and they can just consume and consume. Where for me, like I said, it made it more difficult to gain weight with trying to eat more food. So I ended up drinking a lot of my calories, as you can say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an easy way for people to get in who don't want to sit there chewing everything. I know Com's talking about training yourself to eat. I still remember when I was 60-something kg soaking wet, and I would sit at the dinner table and eat until I was so full that I felt like vomiting, and that's what I'd do every night as well to help gain weight. Because if you're high gaining, it's something you just have to do. You can eat more often as well. It's another one you can do, but obviously eating more often can be difficult when you don't feel hungry. And obviously Mona talks about mass gainers, so supplements are something you can definitely use if you really struggle to get the food in, just because having a chocolate, essentially a 500-calorie chocolate shake at the end of the day, even if you're full, you can probably get that down. Now, obviously, there is a limit to how much weight you want to gain over the weeks and months. It's not like where you're dieting down when you can lose, say, 1% of body weight or body weight each week and kind of still be okay when you're gaining. If you're gaining 1% of body weight each week over the long term, you're going to gain a lot more fat mass than muscle mass, which is likely not what you want to do unless you're looking to be a super heavy and just be massive for certain things. So you just need to be able to track your body weight and just make sure that it's going up slowly. And you're looking at, as Cole mentioned, that 10 to 20% extra in calories of your maintenance. So usually that comes around 200 to 400 calories on top, and you just have to weigh yourself daily to just to see on average per week if you're gaining weight. And then obviously you can make adjustments from there.
Definitely need to make sure you're tracking. I've had a lot of people say to me over the years, I eat so much, but so much is not an objective term. We don't know. So make sure you track. And then find out what method works for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously there's some other things you can do as well. So regarding food choices, pick foods that are less, I guess, lower in fiber. Things like rice over potatoes. Potatoes are always talked about as a bulking food. I don't see why, because per 100 grams you're getting far less carbohydrates than, say, cooked rice. Like cooked rice, you're getting 75 grams of carbs, and cooked potato you're getting 30 something. So it doesn't make any sense. Plus, you're going to be super full if you have baked potatoes. It might be a little different if you make them to fries and stuff, but regardless, your rices and pastas and things like that are far better than your potatoes and things in terms of how you feel, in terms of fullness. And then the other thing is around protein intake. A lot of people will bulk and be like, okay, I'm building muscle, so I'm just going to eat way more protein. But your protein should stay relatively the same regardless of your goal. And you typically max out at around 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, or what does that come to in kilos? It's 1.6. I think it's 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, I think it is. And that's kind of where you max out. You can go up to 1 gram per pound, which is often a standard most people use because it's just relatively easy to track and use, which is fine. I usually sit around 1 gram per pound because I like to eat more meat. So I like to use that, but you can, 0.8 is kind of where you max it out. And that's kind of where you're going to sit. And that means your carbs and fat. So what increases from that? If you go crazy, like the bodybuilders you see on YouTube, and they're eating 350 grams of protein, it makes no sense. You run into so many problems. One problem, obviously, it's more filling, so you don't want to eat a lot of other food. And then secondly, you take away room from carbohydrates and fats. And if you're bulking, you're likely training hard to build muscle. And if you're taking away from the carbs, which is your main fuel source, because you want to eat more protein, then you're going to have less energy for other things. So you want to also balance that, which is quite important. And then the last thing would be picking fattier cuts of meat as well. Obviously, most people stick to chicken breast and whatever else, but an easy way of just adding more calories to your food is change chicken breast for chicken thighs, or leaner cuts of beef for fattier cuts of beef. Say you're buying, 93% lean ground beef, you can buy 85% lean ground beef and things like that. Yeah. And those small changes can add more calories to your diet. Regarding if you're going to add more fat or carbs, typically I recommend you absolutely cream the carbohydrates in your diet. They should be damn high, especially if you're gaining. And then the fats can remain relatively low, so 25 to 30% of your total calories you're taking, which means that carbohydrates end up being 55, 60% of your total calories, which means you'll get up there. And the reason for that is, one, it's going to fuel your training, and two, it's not going to fill you that much. Obviously, the olive oil trick, I've used that a lot too. You can do that, so you don't have to stick to those exact things. And the olive oil trick is really easy to add more calories. I used to actually put olive oil on my pizzas. That's a trick I stole from Dave Tate on one of his old articles. Get pizza and you just put olive oil on it, just something stupidly ridiculous. It's already loaded with fat, and you just add more. So stuff like that.
That's pretty crazy.
You got to do what you got to do, man. How else are you going to get massive? Yeah. Before getting back to the podcast, I want to let you know that down in the description is a link to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground. And within that, you get access to all our training programs, online courses, and into our private Discord community, where all three of us are in there to help you with whatever it is with your training. Regarding the programs, we have Mona, who's done all of the weightlifting cycles. We have Colm, who's done the strongman off-season and strongman competition programs. Then we have all the hallmark Lift Big, Eat Big training programs, Pump Dragon, Flanks Method, and many more. And I've also added muscle building specialization programs within that, and are continuing to update and add training programs into our app. You also get access to Mona's Weightlifting Mastery online course, and you get to join these calls live in the audience, where you can ask members only question and answers at the end of each episode. So if that sounds like you, go down in the description. There's a link there to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground, and that'll give you access to everything I just mentioned. No, I think that covers everything. What? Yep.
I just wanted to ask, with eating fast, did you find you could always do that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. But I was always skinny. I was a skinny little run back in the day, man. 60-something kilos at like 5'8". That's like nothing. Yeah. So
I think,
but I was active,
James needs to add to that, eating out of a bigger bowl. And I'm sure you do that too, Colm. That is one thing that I've seen. He can fill that bowl. And I don't know if you create an illusion that maybe you eating less. But where I'm normally, I'll take a smaller bowl, but I'll fill up, pretty quickly. And I think, most people do, like a general size bowl. I think James eats out of I won't even say that's a food bowl.
It's a fruit bowl, I think. It's a fruit or a salad bowl.
Yes. So that's what he eats out of. And he's given me food out of it because that's the kind of thing that I had to do to gain weight. But looking at it is like very daunting. But yeah, I mean, if you need to eat a lot of food, if you have to have like 5 small bowls in front of you, obviously that's going to be a lot harder than to just have one big bowl and then just fill it with food.
Yeah. And there's some diet approaches that you just cannot do if you're trying to gain weight. I mean, intermittent fasting is one of the popular ones at the moment that really has no grounding in anything related to building muscle performance. There may be some health benefits from it, but other than that, honestly, intermittent fasting is the most overrated piece of shit diet that's ever been pushed. For reals, man, I'm so sick of reading and hearing about it. It's just like, that people just oversell the shit out of that thing. And it's like, okay, you just literally waking up and just not eating breakfast. And then the other one is like 1 meal a day. That's like, that's, I guess it's similar to intermittent fasting, but people love 1 meal a day as well. Like, oh, they feel so good because they're not eating in that. You cannot gain weight.
People try this for bulking.
Well, people jump on these things and, build muscle or try and build muscle on certain things like this or whatever it is. But even so, like, 1 meal a day, you can't get your food in. Like, could you imagine eating 3,000 calories in one meal?
I could.
You could.
But
I was gonna say, I think for a guy it's a lot easier. But yeah, if you guys eat like Colm, didn't you say how much did you say you had to eat? Like, how many thousands of calories was it? Like. Was it like 6,000 or?
Yeah, I was at about 7,000 to 7,500 at my biggest. And that was a struggle for me, even at like my weight back then. And that was eating multiple times a day and having to force myself. I was curious as well, Mona, how many times a day were you eating when you were bulking?
I think I was eating about like 5 to 6 meals. And then basically, but I would also include, like, if I had a shake, I would have a shake like multiple times a day. And then I would include that. Yeah, I would say that's a meal as well, especially if it's a mass gainer. I just won't include it as a meal if I have like a carb drink during training, for example. But yeah, that's the thing I found worked best for me, again, because I can't eat such a big amount in one sitting. And again, even being an athlete, I was also coaching at the time. So being on my feet, having to demo all of those things. I mean, I don't know if you felt it as well, but when you feel gross and just heavy and just, bloated, having to do those kind of things, I would feel lethargic. So we did end up breaking it up into smaller meals. And then by the end of the night, if I didn't have enough calories, then I would add things like almond butter, or I would have like lactose-free ice cream or things like that. I'd make these like little concoctions with like protein, etc. If whatever macronutrient I was short of at the end of the day. But most of the time, also one thing I did is, and I don't know if it's something that you guys followed as well, I try to eat as plain as possible, or as simple as possible. I stuck to the same meals every single day, because I found like if I had to do a variety of meals and trying to come up with like, different dinners every night and those kind of things. Again, I had a very busy life. Sometimes I'd get home at like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. at night. So I would just meal prep, have all of my food, and and just, have whatever, like almond butters and those kind of things, and rice cakes, like with me on hand all the time. But that just worked so much better. I would have like one plan followed every single day. I'm a person that, if I stick to one thing and it works, I will just continue the same thing. I didn't get bored of my meals. So that was the one thing that helped me gain weight as well.
No, I did the same. I eat pretty much most of the same things most days. It just keeps it easy. And you can have variety in spices and sauces that can change the flavor of your meals and stuff, but you can keep things mostly the same just for consistency and ease of eating, especially when you're gaining weight. And then obviously you can treat yourself out every now and then if you need that bump in calories and that variation as well. Obviously, especially here in the States, you've got endless opportunities to eat out somewhere and pick somewhere. What did we have last time? We had Mighty Fine burgers. Bro, Colin, when you come to Texas, you're going to have to hit some Mighty Fine. It's 1,000 calories in a burger, and then if you get a shake, it's another 1,000 calories.
Yeah. And that was the one thing I said to James, because that was one of the first meals we had when we got back here. And just out of interest sake, because I have a lot of like clients and weightlifters and stuff over on this side, I just wanted to see how much or how many calories is in a burger and a shake. And I told James, and we were shocked because, sometimes, say if your calories are just over 2,000 and you get a burger and a shake, and say you get it for lunch, that's your calories basically done for the day.
That's most people's full day. And
so you basically, like what you were saying earlier, like you have to bulk objectively and have a goal. If you just eat junk all the time, at the end of the day, I won't recommend this just for the normal person. You have to be doing all of the other things as well, like your recovery and your training must be hard. And,
training has to be hard during this time.
You can't, just slack and think, oh, okay, I'm going to bulk up and then gain muscle and gain strength and those kind of things. So, that's where people, I think, end up failing and end up getting fat instead of actually, achieving muscle mass and strength.
Yeah, that's funny. That's why I kind of poked the bear with the starting strength thing, because that's so funny how it's like that was the thing, starting strength and go, man.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, you're going to drink a gallon of full fat milk a day, and you're going to do 3 sets of squats, 3 sets of bench, and then 3 sets of rows just for 5 reps. And then you're only going to train 3 times a week. And you can add that many extra calories on top of like your diet. Like it blew my mind. I don't know if you've seen some of the transformations people have posted. I must have been a million back in the day. And there's like literally like no change or just fat mass gain.
I'm pretty sure I bought into it back in the day as well, because I loved just 5. Like my first coach had me doing 5 sets of 5.
Yeah.
Like on squats.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't starting strength. It was a bit different, but
Texas method or something.
It was something relatively basic, but I had good results and I loved. I loved the simplicity. Like
we all did 5 by 5 at some point.
Yeah. And I love the simplicity of telling people, just do go mad. This was before like we were educated and whatnot. Like this was like first year of uni,
Yeah, so when we're in the uni gym.
AUT gym.
Yeah.
And like if you get asked, just do go mad, bro. But the thing is, like even now, I don't even know what a gallon is.
3.89 liters.
Far out. Yeah. So that explains a lot of the transformations. You say 3.8.
3.89 liters, yeah.
So basically 4 liters.
4 liters of milk. Full fat milk too, usually.
That is crazy.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people shit their pants doing it too, because that's
the other issue. So the other thing I would say is, again, like depending on the individual, and like Mona was saying, if you're like different foods are going to affect everyone in different ways. So you need to know, like, use foods that are obvious. I know it sounds obvious, but go with options that are good with you, especially if you do have a job that requires you to move around and be comfortable. Because you don't want to be walking around like super bloated all the time and whatnot. It's just going to make things harder on yourself. So like you can, like the vertical diet was very popular because he took recommendations for people with IBS eating a lot of low FODMAP foods, so like foods that don't produce a lot of gas. So that I do think those are a great option while you're bulking, though, because you don't want to be overly bloated. And then, like, especially if you do jiu-jitsu or something like that, and you're trying to put on a bit of muscle, you do not want to be feeling bloated and lethargic. So
you don't want to be squeezing out farts on the mats.
That's exactly what I was thinking right now. I'm sure, that can end, well, it can be good for you, but bad for your training partner.
Yeah,
And
I've been that
like
training partner.
A few other options like oats. Oats are fantastic. Like, I like them, but for me personally, like, I just don't. I feel quite bloated after them, and they're like. So for me, I know. Although, like, if I search anything nutrition-wise, they're always one of the most recommended foods. I just know for me, I don't really have them around training, and so you kind of need to figure out that sort of thing for you personally. Like, I'm sure you guys have had different foods that people rave about, but that don't sit well with you. It's just, it's part of life.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously where you live in the world as well with what's available. And just to finish this segment off before we move on to our news, obviously a quick smoothie template you can use to create anything that's 500 plus calories, something that we do pretty much daily. Some kind of liquid, usually milk. Start with that, 250 to 300 mils. One banana, then you can add any other fruit you want, some kind of berry, 100 grams, 150 grams of different berries. Then you add your protein powder, and there can be any chocolate, vanilla, whatever flavor you want. You can add your other stuff, creatine, anything else. And then you can finish, depending on how your diet is structured, you can finish with more carbs. So this could be things like oats, because you're going to blend them. It could be things like maple syrup and stuff for more carbs. Anything that's going to make it taste good. You can throw dates in there, shit like that. And then, or what I used to do back in the day is I used to throw heavy cream into my smoothies. I can't remember how much it was, but I used to basically make like 700, 800 calorie smoothies because I'd just throw cream on top of it and blend that up. And that was like my mass gainer smoothie, 700, 800 calories doing that. So that's another option. There you go. That's your next strongman bulking diet, Cole. So that's a template you can use for your smoothies. You can also I used to add spinach in mine too. You don't really taste it. It's another way of doing things too, just to get veggies in. But we're going to move on to a little bit of what's been happening within the strength sports world. Colm, I know Europe's strongest man. That just happened, or is that still happening?
Just happened over the weekend, just gone. And we don't even want to try to pronounce his last name, I'm sorry, but we'll just call him, I see him often called Handsome Pavlo on the Reddit, so we'll just call him Handsome Pavlo. There's also another guy called Pavlo as well, who is a lot wider, so they call him Wide Pavlo, but Handsome Pavlo won over Novikov, who I think was the favorite going in, and is a fantastic strongman. And they're both, it's pretty interesting, like they're both on the lighter side of guys now. So obviously when I was coming up back in 2017, like my last Worlds was definitely the heaviest in terms of both the loads of the weights, but also the competitors. And now you've got guys who are kind of around that 300-pound mark, a little bit more around there, but they're still super strong. So it's a really nice combination at the moment in terms of the athletes, where they're still statically very strong. Maybe not quite the absolute top end strength of, say, Thor at his heaviest, or Eddie at his heaviest, or even Brian at his heaviest, but it comes with, they're so fast and so well conditioned. And it's quite, like, as a fan, I always like the big heavy stuff, but I'm really liking the just the combination of that speed and strength. Like, they had a deadlift for reps, and the winning number was nine reps at 350 kgs. So it's not like these, back in the day when there was the comparison of, say, Zydrunas and Marius, World Strongest Man back then was like quite a bit lighter and faster, but now, even though they're lighter guys winning, so the obvious comparison would be, say, to compare to Marius, their static strength is so high now. Not to say that Marius with some more specific training couldn't have gotten up somewhere, but I think the level across the board is just getting so high. It's getting pretty crazy. And it looked like as well though, the guy who came second, Novikov, he's won World's Strongest Man before. He was actually leading going into the final event, and then it seemed like he had a bit of a mishap with the tacky, which always happens. Well, not always, but it's a common thing that seems to happen every now and again. And the other thing I wanted to ask you guys about, so Handsome Pavlo, we'll call him, like myself, he does a power jerk, or a bit of a power jerk on the log, which I actually quite like to see. Me, personally, I still don't think we've seen the true potential of the jerk in strongman. I don't think, like, although we've had, Misha back in the day, he hit 210 with a split jerk. He's probably the best example of a high-level weightlifter who's done strongman. And he's put up a solid split jerk. But I don't know, for me personally, like, at the moment in strongman, there's more of a push, or like a movement towards doing a push press, right? A push press, and then to get through that hard sticking point, guys lean back now, so making it more like an incline press. That's the most popular at the moment, and it seems a little bit more consistent in that you can grind it out. You're using your upper chest and delts to grind it out. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys reckon. And like, I know you've only had a small play around on the log, right, Mona? I was just curious.
Can you ask that question again, Colm, about the log?
I was just curious if you guys feel like there's more potential in terms of what we've seen with the jerk. Like, you guys having seen the highest levels of weightlifters doing big jerks and maybe like jerks out of the rack in training. I'm just curious if you think, if let's say they transferred over to strongman, like Lasher or someone, do you think they would be able to put up, so the world record at the moment is 230 in the log press, and generally they say because of the dimension of the log, it puts you in a little bit different position. It's harder to get a big effective transfer of force with the dip and drive like you could with a barbell being nice and close. So they say that the push press could potentially be a more efficient movement. I don't know. I was just curious if you guys had any thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think, Colm, you make a good point with, just in what position the log actually puts you. Because someone like Lasha, for example, he might surprise you and do something like a push press or a power jerk or something to get it up. Because it's, even though, the movement will be similar, moving from your chest upwards, like you would do like a split jerk or power jerk. But because of the shape of the log, it can definitely make things a lot more uncomfortable. So athletes want to get to that end point and do the strongest lift that they can, or lift the most that they can overhead, but also not jack up their backs and stuff like that in the process. So for example, like in the olden days, weightlifters actually used to have the press was included in weightlifting, and the way they would actually do it and the people had, or I would say guys, because at that time, women didn't really do weightlifting. When they would do it, they would almost bend back completely, almost how they would be in like a bench press position. So in extremely like bad position, like you would say for your back, for instance, or your lower back. But that's how they did it, and that's how they got the bar overhead. So they also had the flexibility, where I think now if a weightlifter had to try and do something like that, they might just actually end up injuring themselves. So it definitely, the technique wise with the different types of equipment, bar versus log, I think that plays, a big role. So that would take practice. But I definitely do think, and I've done this in CrossFit as well, where we've had some strongman events, is I would use my weightlifting background to get whatever I had, if it was a log, or back in the day they had this thing called, it was a pig, but it was this massive piece of metal that you had to flip. And the way I would flip it is I would actually, where most people would like, pull it up and use their leg to get it up. And I think some people do that with like the logs or the balls or stuff like that, too, maybe in strongman. But I ended up using my power to clean it up and just like flipping my hands over and under it. Maybe some people will do that with like massive tires and stuff too. And I would then almost use like a jerk to push the pig over. I don't know what you would call it. It was, just this big, massive, they called it the pig in CrossFit. I'm sure it has another name in.
I think they still call it that, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I just don't know if other sports would call it something different.
It doesn't exist in other sports.
Okay then.
Yeah, it's just this huge, massive, heavy metal thing.
I think only Rogue manufactures it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I will have to like send you a picture of it, Calm, so you can see. But it's just this massive piece of like metal that you had to flip over, very uncomfortable. But my body automatically reverted to wanting to do a clean and jerk when I did the movement, where other athletes had different methods of doing it. So I'm sure, when it comes to getting the log overhead, if they feel strongest, because obviously doing a dip and drive, could put their backs in a bad position if they had to do a split jerk. But I think if you do have the flexibility and the mobility, because I'm not quite sure, are strongmen pretty mobile or flexible, or is that one of the things, because you guys don't have to you don't have to have the log back to make it a good lift, right? You can just have it straight up.
Pretty dodgy lockouts these days.
Yeah.
But it depends on the person. Like this guy who won, being a lighter guy, he seems quite athletic, seems to hit a pretty good position. But the current world record with LBEB is, I know it's gotten quite a bit of criticism for being a dodgy lockout. And it's more of like a from the side, more like that sort of thing, still gets the down signal, opposed to like a proper weightlifting one.
Yeah. I'm sure I've top weightlifters like Lusher and stuff trained on it. Yeah, I mean, Misha was a good example, right? As you mentioned. Man, he was easily my favorite weightlifter, strongman hybrid back in the day. That him split jerking the logs. Insane. Like, you can't tell me that if strongman got better at that, because you could become more efficient in that dip and you get more efficient at driving the log up, and you're not limited by pressing power. Surely, yeah. Makes logical sense.
Because Misha, I've had people use him as an argument against that, because they say Misha was a weightlifter, right? Full-time weightlifter, very high level, and the best he got, I believe, was 210, whereas Zadrunas beat him. So they say, the push press is better because of Zadrunas. But I don't know. I still feel like, one, Zadrunas is just an absolute freak of freaks. But then also, two, I don't know. I just feel like there's still more potential there.
Yeah. Well, you can push yourself under the log, right? It's still pretty dodgy because the log's bigger than a barbell to move out of the way from. But if you can drive yourself under a log with a power jerk or split jerk, then the log doesn't have to travel as far.
But I also wanted to add, the thing is also like the jerk is very technical, may it be with a bar or with a log. So I think that also regarding coaching, if, strongman had to be coached by people or coaches that would teach them to split jerk the log up, then they would end up split jerking it up. So I think it also depends on like what you're taught, what you're used to, and then like any new movement, you have to continue practicing it. You can't just one day say, okay, I'm going to now start split jerking at a competition. Bless you. You can't just go and split jerk at a competition. I mean, like, these are top level strongmen. They've been practicing their technique, may it be dodgy or bending their backs backward and all those kind of things. But that's how they mastered the pressing the log overhead. So very, very much the same with, if a weightlifter had to come over, that's the kind of movement that they have mastered their whole life, basically. So I'm sure then, if maybe it got taught more often, or, a strongman ended up maybe playing around with it, maybe they don't do it because, they don't have the correct coaching on how to do it. And like James was saying, getting yourself under the log, like how you would get yourself under the bar, could be really efficient. But if you don't know how to do it, then it's not going to be more efficient. It's going to end up, you're going to end up doing worse in it probably than what you would have using your old technique of pressing it up or push pressing it up, for instance, or even power jerking it up.
Yeah. There is another guy, Rob Kearney, also does a split jerk, but I believe he doesn't have the Olympic lifting background. Definitely not the one that Misha had. So he's another. That's another interesting idea. Kind of like what you're saying is, what if like a strongman from the ground up was built with with having that ability to do a split jerk? Would be quite interesting as we go into the future. Do you know off the top of your head what Lasher would be able to jerk out of a rack?
Cool. I'm not sure. Moni, do you know?
Well, I know he totaled very close to 500. So are you looking it up now, James? I
feel like I've seen a video of him.
Maybe 260 something.
267 is the world record.
Yeah, because I remember 260 something is what he did. And I have not seen him jerk of rack. I don't know, because often when you see anything of Lasha, it would be, a snatch or a clean and jerk, or like when I was at the Worlds, with him in the training hall. I mean, I was very lucky. I trained right in front of him. But he will do like traditional things, like starting off with like sometimes like muscle snatches and those kind of things, and then going into snatches and then, squats. But you don't really see athletes like so close to the competition doing things like, I mean, you will every now and again seeing athletes do split jerks and stuff like that. But so close to the competition, you'll often just see them do the classical lifts. So that would be interesting. But again, it also, I'm pretty sure with how easy he makes the lifts look, he could probably do a lot more than what he's done in competition, but you also don't know.
Is that 267, that was him?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did have a close competitor. I can't remember if it was last year. I don't know if James watched it with me. He had a close competitor, but they did say Lasha was coming out of an injury. And it was very, very close. And I can't remember if it was the snatch or the clean and jerk that they were so close at. And it was like one going and the other one going. And they said this was the first time ever that Lasha has basically been chased. Someone has been on his tail. And I think the guy might have actually done either the same snatch as him or same clean and jerk. And that was a big surprise for, followers and viewers, because everyone just knows how strong Lasha is. I mean, And if you don't know Lasha, and if you're maybe watching and you are a powerlifter or strongman athlete, you really do want to keep an eye out. This guy is amazing. He is honestly probably, I think he's one of the strongest men strongest weightlifters that's ever been around.
Probably won't ever see his potential because of the way the system works. He'll just break the world record by a kilo every time, just so we can get that extra pension money out of the Georgian government. So instead of pushing the limit, just break it by a kilo every time and just sub-max every competition and just make bank, basically.
Yeah, because he's one of those athletes that, as big as he is, he's got a really good technique. And he makes, and not just technique, he's super explosive as well. I'm not quite sure how much Lasha weighs, probably close to... maybe close to 170 or something like that, or 160. I'm not quite sure, but I also remember seeing him eat in the dining hall. He doesn't play games when it comes to eating. Probably similar how maybe the strong man will eat, or strong men will eat. But very impressive in all feats. He is just one of those athletes that has, like I said, a great technique. He's explosive and he's very exciting to watch.
How much money would he... I'm only asking in terms of, he's getting so much money, there's pretty much no chance he'd ever even bother doing log, right?
Yeah, no. Well, that won't be funded by the sports ministry in Georgia, because how it works typically in Eastern, at least in the Eastern Bloc countries, you get a pension for life based on performance. So if you medal at certain big competitions, Worlds, Europeans, Olympics, whatever it is, based on the medal or based on your placing you get is how much essentially a stipend every month you get for life. So, for example, you come third at Europeans, I think it was €750 or something like that, and you get that every month for life. And then obviously you just stack up if you're winning, you just stack all that up over time,
That's
and
cool.
you start making cash. So then, and obviously, every time you break a world record, you get a bonus, things like
and
that.
also, I want to add that, like, with weightlifting, by the end of your career, you are so broken that you end up just retiring. Some of these athletes go into coaching, but the athletes who end up, like Lasha, breaking world records, Olympic records, Olympic gold medals, etc., they make such a good amount that, they can just end up retiring when they're done.
The perks of a ex-communist system, You just the government just pays you to win medals and stuff. But I think we're going to move on to the weightlifting news as well, Mona, with what's been happening recently. Obviously, there were two big competitions throughout last week with the Youth Worlds, but also the Pan Ams.
Yes, and I will make this short because my little one over here is getting a little grumpy. But it's been an eventful week, or the last week that just passed, with the Pan Am Championships, and also then, like James mentioned, the Youth World Championships. And we spoke about, youth being up until the year, I think you turn 17, you are a youth athlete. And there was just one that was that really stood out for me, a world record that was broken by a girl that was in the 81 kilogram class. And, a girl that's under 17 years old, clean and jerking 129 kilos is super impressive, especially if you are a youth athlete. And I mean, there's numerous others that did amazing lifts. And, these youth athletes, when you look at them lift, you can just start look at seniors because they are just as good. Some of them are even better. So that's one thing that was super impressive. And I know last time we spoke about, where's the ceiling in weightlifting and in powerlifting. It seems like, once a record or a world record gets broken, that someone thought, whoa, this record probably won't get broken in, forever. A youth athlete comes and breaks a record, and it just shows you that it's unlimited potential with these athletes. And the other thing as well that was really amazing to watch with the categories that I did end up watching was the Pan Am Championships, with also a lot of Olympic medalists, world-class athletes. And one of the things that and James hasn't mentioned this yet, but we will end up speaking about, something in weightlifting that's been a hot topic over the last, I would say, since 2021, because the Olympics was supposed to be 2020 and then it moved to 2021. And one thing weightlifting world got really strict with, especially in the on the judging side of things, is the press out. And with the press out now, the press out has always been a no lift in weightlifting. And that's why I asked Colm with powerlifting or strongman if it's very similar, if they, have these kind of rules, if you can do a press out, should it be fully back, that kind of thing. Because in weightlifting, with a snatch and a clean and jerk, the bar has to go. So with a snatch, it will move from the ground upwards. And if your arm rebends, or if you snatch it up and it's bent and then straightens, that will be in weightlifting a no lift. And over the last few years, I'd say they've really become extra strict with this, where athletes would just have a shoulder movement and not even an elbow movement, and the judges would call it a no lift. So there's been a lot of controversy over this, and a lot of spectators who's been watching the sport ask the question of they don't understand why this lift looked successful, but yet it got given red lights. And the reason why is, the judges would call it a no lift due to them thinking it was some sort of a press out. And again, yes, if the athlete does bend their elbows, or they do rebend their elbows in the jerk or in the snatch, by all means, very much it's a no lift. I know a lot of people have, spoken out about saying, take the press out of the rules, that kind of thing. But then I also believe if you do that, it does make weightlifting become an ugly sport, because weightlifting is such a beautiful technical sport. And the movements are so technical. So if you end up, making it ugly, like, for example, if you see some CrossFit competitions, athletes end up doing, if they do a ground to overhead, doesn't matter how they get that bar overhead, as long as it's overhead, they'll pass it. And I do believe, you don't want to make the sport ugly like that. So keep it neat, keep it technical. That's what you want to do. But they have become extra strict with regards to the press out. And I've seen some really bad calls since the Olympics where athletes have bombed, where it, honestly, seeing it myself, other weightlifters, coaches have seen this, where, they won't even see a slight press out, but the judges would call it a press out. And where I think a lot of people have trouble with this is the inconsistency of judging in weightlifting. So, for example, if you want to call out one lifter and give them a no lift because of a slight elbow bend, you need to do that then for all the lifters in those categories. And what I saw at the Youth Worlds is there was one athlete in particular that I watched. She missed 2 of her snatches, and then on her 3rd snatch, she had a very prominent bend in her elbow, but they ended up giving her a good lift. So she ended up not bombing, which is really good. It's amazing. Luck was on her side. But then the very next lift after that, the girl had a slight elbow bend, something that, you had to have really looked for, and they ended up failing her lift. So that's, I think, where the problem comes in with the press out rule is if you want to have the press out rule, make sure that it's consistent. If you call out one athlete for it, you have to call out the rest of the athletes for it. So keep that consistency, making sure that, what counts for the one will count for the other. Then I think also people watching it, spectator-wise, will understand the sport a lot more as well, because people nowadays don't understand why they just end up failing weightlifters who just has maybe some shoulder movement, and they'll call it out as, a press out. And then one thing that was really interesting for me is, and everyone watching, if you are in the weightlifting world, will know Maddie Rogers, an amazing athlete, really strong. She competed at the Pan Am Championships last week, and she ended up going for a 144 kilogram clean and jerk. They ended up failing her for that lift after, giving her the down signal, even though this wasn't a press out. Again, there was very much inconsistency. So she needed this lift, for example, to give her enough points also towards her Olympic qualification. But this lift would have also have put her on the podium for Team USA for the Pan American Championships. And what ended up happening was, and I know people have posted about this on the internet, people have asked questions, people don't understand. I know I shared it on my story, posting a bit of an explanation of this movement as well. She ended up jerking the weight up, and she ended up turning. The judges then gave her a down signal, which they shouldn't have done, because if you are not fully in position, if you give the athlete a down signal, when they are stable, then it's a good lift, unless, the athlete was actually bending their arms or, doing a press out, or
because she was given white lights, right? She was given white lights and a down signal.
Yes. And then they ended up, calling it out as a no lift. So this was what I would say, not an athlete problem, but a judge's problem. So they ended up failing the lift because of the judges giving her the down signal way too soon, which was their mistake. And this ended up costing her not only points towards the Olympic qualification, but it also ended up taking away from her being on the podium.
Yeah, you can't give white lights a down signal and then change it to red lights after they've dropped away. That just makes no sense. You just have to go with that call. And I think what people will take from this as well is Mona called CrossFit ugly. So CrossFit is now an ugly sport on this podcast. I'm
sorry for those who actually do have a good technique in CrossFit, but yeah, it's one of those things where I've seen some horrible movements, especially with Olympic weightlifting. I know as well, when it comes to gymnastics coaches, when you see CrossFitters do gymnastic movements, they cringe because they just end up doing the movements not elegantly like a gymnast would do it. And the very same counts for weightlifting. They end up doing the movements just to get the bar overhead. Doesn't matter if they starfish clean it or, one arm bent and pushing it out, overhead. So, I mean, there are some good athletes out there that does have good technique, but most of the time you don't see the best technique in CrossFit.
And the other problem, I guess the other issue with the elbow, the inconsistencies with the press out rules as well is the way the challenge cards in the jury is used. So you've got essentially your judges, your 3 judges in the front, and they're given the white lights or red lights. And you've got a jury as well that will overturn whatever the judges think if they think something different, or they'll handle with the challenge card that a coach has. That's a relatively new rule in weightlifting. And the problem is, say you have judges that give white lights and say the jury overturns it and turns it to a no lift because of a press out. Then if you challenge it, the challenge goes to the same jury who just ruled the press out. So why are they going to change their mind? There needs to be an independent thing.
So,
no, there was no challenge cards that event.
So there was no challenge card and there was no jury, which is absurd because, again, this is a Olympic qualification event where they should have had this. So they ended up failing on their part, not having it.
Probably saving some money, something in the back pocket.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, it takes away from that athlete who, she's looking strong for the Olympics, but something like this can either make or break an athlete going into the future with her competitions, or if she does have a competition that's maybe not as good as what this one was, then it could definitely affect some big results at the end of the day.
Do you know if it's true if they lost their bags as well?
No, did you post about it?
Oh, just my wife said that they lost their bags.
Really?
This sounds a bit dodgy. You guys haven't heard it, maybe.
I don't know. I have no clue. I don't know.
I mean, I haven't been on social media that much other than, posting, some weightlifting stuff and whatever and reading up on the latest news. So I'm not quite sure if that did happen. You can tell Jenny, I'll look into it and I'll let her know if it was true or not.
Yeah, nice. And that brings us to the end of this episode number 2. But if you enjoyed this, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, comment on the comments once we upload the replay there, share it with your friends, all of that, because it all helps the show grow. But cheers, guys, for coming on, and we'll chat next week.